Hi, welcome to Digging for Truth, where we explore the reliability and authenticity of the Bible. I'm your host, Henry Smith. Today, the president of the Christian Thinkers Society, Dr. Jeremiah Johnston, is our guest, and we'd like to welcome him back to the show once again. Jeremiah, welcome back to Digging for Truth.
It's great to be with you, Henry. I'm such a huge fan of yours, and I benefit greatly from Digging for Truth, and I'm a YouTube subscriber and just so appreciate the work of Associates for Biblical Research. As a scholar, as a pastor, as a Christian, I'm constantly asked about where I should send people for up-to-date current information about the truth claims of Christianity and all of the evidence that support it. And I'm always forwarding people Digging for Truth and Associates for Biblical Research. So I'm very willing to jump on a program with you at any time. And I really had an enjoyable time in studio with you last time, where we had a great discussion, and I'm delighted to talk to you again.
Well, thank you for that. That's very gracious, and I'm so encouraged by that. It's just makes me feel great to hear that, and all of us here appreciate it so much. We were together talking about the Shroud of Turin last time together, which has turned out to be one of our most popular episodes on our YouTube channel, and it was a dynamic discussion about all the evidence. We today want to talk about something else related to the resurrection of Jesus, and that is the location of the tomb that
Right.
Jesus was buried in and obviously was resurrected in. And you've done some work on this, some study. There's two candidates that have emerged over the centuries. I'd like to cover the first one, which is called the Garden Tomb. Now, we're going to say up front that we don't believe this is the right location, but we do want to share with people why it's kind of been identified and just give them a little information about it.
Absolutely, Henry. And I want to be very pastoral because when I first started going to the land of Israel before I got into scholarship, I was convinced that the Garden Tomb was the place of Jesus' physical bodily resurrection. Everything seems right and accurate about it. It's a serene place. It's beautiful. It's led by Protestant Christians. And so if you go there to the land of Israel today, generally you can take communion and observe the Lord's Supper and have worship services and spend all kinds of time there, just simply meditating on the power of Jesus' resurrection. And of course, you're taken to an area overlooking a bus stop that has a hill that kind of resembles the face of a skull in modern day. Who knows what it would have looked like 2,000 years ago. However, having said that, it just simply, so I want to just acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge how important the site is, especially for Protestants who are watching our program. And yet, one thing we do at Digging for Truth, and one thing I do in my biblical scholarship, is we let the evidence speak for itself, and we follow the evidence wherever it may lead. And that's why this broadcast today is so important, because there are many pastors, many media people who believe that the Garden Tomb is the spot where Jesus resurrected, because they feel like the Holy Sepulchre, everything is wrong with that site. And yet we need to talk about the evidence for it. And so the Garden Tomb is kind of the Protestant go-to site. Chances are, if you're watching this broadcast or listening to it, if you've been to the land of Israel, you were probably taken to the Garden Tomb or Gordon's tomb. Of course, that was not even found as the place of Jesus's resurrection until the mid to late 1800s. And Henry, if you don't mind me saying, this was very much a Protestant reaction to the Catholic, well, it's even more than Catholic. It's actually 6 different denominations that have some level of control of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This was a Protestant overreaction, and I say that as a Protestant, by the way, as a Protestant biblical scholar, to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And yet we do need to talk about some of the evidence of why the Garden Tomb is not likely the spot of Jesus's resurrection.
Yeah. It's. I feel conflicted about it too, because I love the experience of going to the Garden Tomb. I mean, I've shed tears there because it's so nice. It's so nicely done. So one of the key things that we have to look at is the type of tomb it is and the probable era that the tomb was constructed.
Exactly.
Talk about that, Jeremiah.
Yeah, so I've already mentioned there was somewhat of a Protestant overreaction in the 1800s. It goes all the way back to Edward Robinson's work. And then in the late 1800s, General Gordon goes to Israel and essentially says, this is the spot where Jesus rose from the grave. Now, and again, I'm talking about the Garden Tomb. And even the director of the Garden Tomb exhibit will agree that this likely is not the spot, evidentially speaking. Where the rubber meets the road, as it were, is the fact that Gabriel Barkay, an Israeli archaeologist, makes it very clear that the tomb that is commemorated as the tomb of Jesus in the Garden Tomb is actually much older than the first century. The most conservative estimates put it as a Hellenistic tomb, which your audience would be well aware that's 3rd to 4th century BC. But some estimates from Gabriel Barkay and others go back to even the 7th or 8th century BC. So think Isaiah times for this tomb. The bottom line is, Henry, it's just much too old to be the tomb of Jesus. And if you remember the biblical accounts claim that Jesus was buried in a new tomb, not a tomb that was hundreds of years old. Secondly, a lot of people have identified this has to be the spot because there seems to be a trough. Well, it actually is a trough, but it seems to be a wheel well where the heavy tomb would be able to roll the tomb cover in front to close the tomb, to seal it. Well, that was actually from the medieval era. The Crusaders used that to actually be a feeding trough for their horses. So there's nothing from late antiquity related to the tomb covering. And so I could go on, but I think that's enough to say that based on the evidence from archaeologists who we highly regard, highly respect, it does leave the question. It's a big question, and I actually do not think that the Garden Tomb is the physical place of Jesus's resurrection based on the archaeology.
Yeah, you have some helpful information in your book, Body of Proof, as well, where you discuss some more of that. So here in our first segment, as we got a couple minutes left in it, if you maybe introduce the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, just to give us a quick intro to that, because we're going to focus in on the evidence there, which is really quite extraordinary. So give us a tutorial on that to start it, and then we'll move to our next segment.
Thanks for mentioning my book, Henry. And I do have this book, Body of Proof. I would encourage every Christian to get a copy of. These are the top 7 reasons to believe in the physical bodily resurrection of Jesus. And not just the evidential reasons, but why it matters today to our Christian life. I actually have a companion Bible study where I filmed at all of the resurrection sites of Jesus of Nazareth. There are 11 episodes that come on demand, downloadable with the Bible study. I'll say this. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is the most important spot on planet Earth as it relates to Jesus of Nazareth and the study of the historical Jesus, because it is ground zero for the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus based on the evidence.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because, and we'll talk about the actual evidence, because that's where the rubber hits the road, as you said. Experientially, I think this is where people struggle with, when you go to the Garden Tomb, it is such a serene experience. I went there the first time and there was hardly anybody there. And it was just reflecting on what Jesus had done for me. And then often when you go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, it's crowded, it's dark, it feels dingy. It doesn't have the same ethos, right? And you sort of struggle with that from an experiential standpoint. But as you said, we're not here to slam on the Garden Tomb, but we want to talk about the evidence. Well, we're here with Dr. Jeremiah Johnston talking about the location of the tomb of Jesus. Where was it, and what's the evidence for it? And we'll continue that discussion after this break.
Digging for Truth is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different.
Hi, welcome back to Digging for Truth. I'm here with Dr. Jeremiah Johnston, and we're exploring the location of Jesus' tomb and his subsequent resurrection. Okay, Dr. Johnston, one of the criticisms of the location of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is its location in relation to the city wall of Jerusalem. Tell us about what the scriptures say and sort of the history behind that.
Well, and we have to get this right, Henry. I so appreciate your question. In another broadcast that has gone viral, you and I talk about the Shroud of Turin, and a great discussion point is, well, where was the shroud? Was it at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or was it in the Garden Tomb? And so this is the natural sequel to that discussion that we enjoyed together. One thing that Edward Robinson said when he discredited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is he said there's no way that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre can be the site of Jesus's death by crucifixion and resurrection because it's inside the city walls. And so it caused them to look for a different location. But what do we know from the evidence? What do we know from history? We know that Herod Agrippa in AD 41 to 44, he would be the grandson of Herod the Great. So we're talking about Herod Agrippa, the grandson of Herod the Great. He extended the walls of Jerusalem northward in AD 41 to 43 and to 44. And that is when the walls expanded beyond the current location of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to make it within the city. That is a very important evidential point that Edward Robinson missed, that Agrippa expanded the walls northward. And so then he looked for this location of the Garden Tomb about 200 meters from the Damascus Gate. And so based on that, we can no longer say that the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is discredited because it was actually outside the city. And not only was it outside the city, it was located in a rock quarry. We know this. We know that there are other first century tombs in and around the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. In fact, I had this great experience very recently in my Body of Proof Bible study where I filmed, as I mentioned, at all of the resurrection sites of Jesus of Nazareth. I was granted access to film in and around the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on the Lord's Day. We even filmed inside the Edicule. Now, I want to speak to people who've been there because, like, as you've described so well, Henry, you go in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and it's just the crowds are heaving. There's incense. You can't breathe. There's different languages being spoken. It seems everything seems wrong about it to our feels and our vibes, but everything is right about it evidentially. We know that was along the main thoroughfare in and out of the city of Jerusalem. It was a rock quarry. Joseph of Arimathea would have wanted to be buried in a tomb on the main entrance of town, the main exit of town, where he could be gathered to his family name and remembered for posterity. And this is indeed where Jesus was laid to rest. When you go into it, you see that the place of Golgotha, the place of Calvary, and to use the Latin, the place of the skull, is within the complex. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is actually a complex of various buildings because you have the location of Golgotha, the place of the skull where Jesus was crucified, and then 200 feet away is what's called the Edicule. And if you go inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, it looks like that little holy house inside the dome of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. That is built over the first century limestone burial shelf where the body is laid. And you say, Jeremiah, Henry, could that be accurate? I mean, could Jesus have really been crucified 200 feet away from where he was laid to rest? Yes. When I teach on this, I've written books on this. I've published 250,000 words on what happened that first Easter weekend. We know the date. The date is April 3rd of crucifixion, AD 33, and the resurrection morning would be April 5th. AD 33. We know the exact date. And so it's in that very spot where we know that Jesus was resurrected. There's some other fantastic evidence, though, I know you want to talk about.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, that's really good. Circling back, thank you for that. Circling back a little bit to Edward Robinson, he sees a wall and he sees the church and the church is inside the wall and he makes an inference. And this is a lesson for us as Christians, like, okay, you could see on the surface why he made that inference, but, only in the 10-year window, Agrippa extends that city wall about 10 years after the resurrection, not much more than that. So that's why historical investigation is so important. You can head off in a wrong direction by making a supposition that looks logical and turns out not to be based on the evidence. Maybe comment on that a little.
Well, it's so important. And I've sat with many pastors, and I know there are several ministers, thousands who watch your broadcast. And I've had to lovingly correct them on this because they've taken that talking point of Edward Robinson and said, oh, no, it's inside the city walls, as if the walls that we have today reflect the walls of first century Jerusalem. And anyone who's traveled anywhere in the Bible lands world, and notice I say the Bible lands plural. I mean, you go across the book of Acts, the world of the book of Acts, you're going to see all of those walls. Very few of them actually go back to the first century strata. And so we have to be good Christian thinkers. And that's why we have to utilize ministries like Associates for Biblical Research to make sure we get the facts right. Now, here's some other cool things. There's some tidbits that I want you to know. Did you know that a Muslim family actually unlocks and locks the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on a daily basis? It's remarkable to think about this, that the most holy site in all of Christianity, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the keys are held by a Muslim family because of an agreement called the status quo that you can look up. And this Muslim family unlocks the door to our holiest site every single day, every single morning. Now, I'm actually very thankful for this Muslim family because they're the ones that gave me approval to film all around the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So I was very glad to become friends with them because we have footage. We had 2 drones and 4 cameras, and we have footage in and around the Church of the Holy Sepulchre that I think only National Geographic has. It's so remarkable, the footage that we have, because I wanted to take people on a journey that this is indeed the spot, and I want to help people get over some of the hindrances that they may have. But yeah, we don't want to make those same inferences at all. We want to be good, careful students of evidence, students of Scripture, and then we will be on the right track of truth.
Yeah, on top of the fact that Agrippa built that, we know that there was archaeological work done by Israeli archaeologists that confirmed that the location of the wall was in its proper place in relation to the tomb and the Holy Sepulchre. Well, listen, Dr. Johnston, we're going to go to a break, and we're going to finish up in our final segment in just a few moments. We'll be right back.
Bible and Spade is a non-technical quarterly publication published by the Associates for Biblical Research. Written from a scholarly and conservative viewpoint, Bible and Spade supports the inerrancy of the biblical record and is a must-read for both the serious Bible student and anyone asking if they can really trust the Bible. Archaeological evidence, properly interpreted, upholding the history of the Bible. Subscribe today at BibleArchaeology.org.
Hi, welcome back to Digging for Truth. We're exploring the location of Jesus' tomb and his subsequent resurrection. All right, Dr. Johnston, let's talk about the Emperor Hadrian and what he does in Jerusalem related to the tomb of Jesus. And that's all I'm going to ask with a question, so I don't fill it in. I want you to fill it in with what we know about that, because there's a lot there.
This is a remarkable question you're asking, Henry. I was on a major media program recently, and the host told me, well, I'm not comfortable with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre because Constantine's mother just kind of pointed the finger and chose that was the site of Jesus's resurrection. And I had to respond and say, oh no, it's actually 200 years earlier than that we know the Church of the Holy Sepulchre's location. And this is the question that you're asking. Keep in mind, there were 3 major Jewish revolts. Obviously, 66 to 70, the temple's destroyed, the massacre at Masada. And then there's a revolt in Alexandria in the early 2nd century. And then 132 to 135 AD, and you should take notes to this, there is the Simon Bar Kokhba, the Simon son of the star revolt. And the Romans lost thousands at the hands of the Jews. And it was at this point where Emperor Hadrian, who reigns AD 117 to 138, decides to absolutely raze Jerusalem from the ground. And this is where Hadrian actually renames the country of Israel Palestine. And he does this to be very pejorative against the Jews. This is why I actually never used the term Palestine, because it was used in a Jewish Holocaust setting. And not only does Hadrian rename Israel Palestine, he goes on to actually rename Jerusalem Aelia Capitolina. And he goes to town and he decides to desecrate the most holy sites of Judaism because he hates Jews. He sees Christianity as just another sect of Judaism. He doesn't care He just wants to destroy it all. And he puts down a temple to the god Jupiter and Venus over the site of this Jewish site where they worship this dying, rising god named Christus, or Jesus of Nazareth. Hadrian unwittingly becomes the great protector of the most holy site of all Christianity, in that all those Christians in the first 300 years of Christianity, we didn't move around much back then. We stayed in, we had a great village memory, as it were. We had great social memory. And then he thereby preserved the location where 200 years later, Constantine's mother comes to town and said, hey, we really need to get rid of these pagan temples because this is the spot of the crucifixion and this is the spot of the resurrection.
Yeah, that's great stuff. So the story about Constantine's mother is more complex. The locals knew where the tomb was, and they knew it had been desecrated by Hadrian. Correct me if I'm wrong about this, that the statue of Venus was deliberately put right over the tomb itself once the platform was built.
That's exactly right.
Do I have that right? So comment on this. We have here what we would call a hostile witness to the location. Somebody who hated Christianity and is actually authenticating the site as the burial site. Give us some
It's very
thoughts
important
on that.
because this is extra biblical. This is a hostile witness. This is not someone who has a bias to believe it. They're trying to do everything they can to destroy it, but thereby they preserve the site. And this is why the archaeology is so rich and so good. And you make a great point about the fact that those early Jewish Christian families, the first Christians were Jews, what we would call completed Jews, who came to faith in Messiah Jesus. They would have known where Jesus died and where he rose again. In fact, there was a temple venerated as well. There was, a pagan deity venerated at the site of Calvary as well. And so, yes, those sites were very close together. Now, it used to be a rock quarry. So today, where it's completely flat, there used to be all kinds of different elevation. The crucifixion spot, even though it's only 200 feet away from the tomb would have, there would have been a great cavity between the two. So it would have seemed like much further. Jesus is crucified up on the hill, overlooking this quarry on the main entrance, going into town. His resurrection, you would have had to go down and up to get to the 200 feet directly across, if that makes sense. That tomb, that pagan temple that Hadrian, it just filled in all of that, filled in the rock quarry, etc. And that's where, when you go in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre today, Henry, you can actually go 50 feet away and film at other first century tombs in that same quarry, similar to the venerated site of Jesus.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. It's kind of interesting. You mentioned that Hadrian, by trying to desecrate and blaspheme the name of Jesus, preserved the site. And it's also kind of funny in a way that Constantine kind of undertook one of the first archaeological excavations by digging the material out to expose the first century tomb. Isn't that interesting?
Well, and I always call Constantine's mother, Helena, the mother of biblical archaeology.
Yeah.
She started it all, and yes, and it wasn't. And I want to correct also this one, as you rightly said, it's not just pointing the finger saying, "Oh, that's a holy site." There are local Christian leaders who are saying, "Hey, this is the site. We've known of this in our family traditions for hundreds of years." And so this is where this archaeology is so rich. And so if I go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre today, everything may seem wrong about it to my feels, but everything is right about it evidentially. And so the end result is we need to be like those Christians in John chapter 20 who saw and they believed. This should be a buttress to our faith. This should strengthen our faith. This kind of dialogue that we know based on Roman emperors where Jesus died and rose again. Christianity is not a fable. It's not a myth. It's not a legend or fairy tale. The Bible is about real places, real people, real events. And therefore, we can trust the facts of the gospel for our salvation and live in a way that follows Jesus the rest of our life because it's true.
Yeah, that's really good. Now excellent. We should add that Constantine wasn't a very good archaeologist, though, because he destroyed a lot of the tomb when they did remove the platform. So I think ABR would have done a little better job. But they weren't professional archaeologists, so I find that interesting. Enough of the tomb, though, for us to know it's a first century tomb, right? I mean, we've got the finger-shaped the kokim that are found in there, right? You're familiar with that, where they would put the bone boxes.
Right, and it's important to note as well, in 2016, 2017, After 500 years, the tomb was opened. And what I mean by the tomb being opened, the actual marble cover or seal that is on the limestone shelf where the body of Jesus and the shroud would have been laid was opened. And they did essentially a refurbishment, because the tomb was just, after 2,000 years, it was desecrating. It was just being slowly diminished. They wanted to refurbish the edicule around it, and they tested it, and all of it came back to 1st century. So we indeed have a 1st century limestone tomb shelf where Jesus' body was laid.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to give you the final minute, Jeremiah, to close the show, to talk about the significance of this, and of course, tie it into the significance of the greatest event of all time. At this place, in this church, is the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth.
Absolutely. This is the epicenter of Christianity, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. 6 different denominations in some way have different aspects of control or access to the tomb. It's a place that has been holy. It's a place that's been special to Christianity now for 2,000 years, dating back to the time antedating Hadrian. And it's very important to us because, as a dad of 5 children, Gen Z children who are looking for evidence, wanting to say, hey, what distinguishes Christianity from Islam? What distinguishes Christianity from the other world isms and belief systems? The very fact that we can use archaeology as Christianity's closest cousins to simply validate the truth claims of Christianity is beyond exaggeration. We can't overstate the fact enough that we know the date of Jesus's death by crucifixion. We know the location based on history, and therefore we can say the event happened. The rest, though, comes down to faith. And so for some people, no evidence will ever be enough to get them to believe. Praise God for those who see the evidence and do believe. That's the camp that I'm in, and that's my prayer, that you'll take this broadcast, that this very important discussion that Henry and I have had. And you might say, well, Jeremiah, do you still take groups to the Garden Tomb? Absolutely, I do, because for all the reasons that, Henry, you pointed out. But having said that, I also spend a lot of time at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I like to get my hands dirty in the real living archeology, and I like to go to the places where the events really happen. And isn't it great that, unlike any other religion, no other religion has archaeology. In fact, other religions avoid all points of tangency with archaeology at all costs, whereas Christianity says, hey, you can test us. That everything we believe comes down to this event that occurred that first Easter weekend.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for being on the show, Jeremiah. We appreciate you so much in your ministry, and God bless you.
Thank you, Henry. God bless you too.
Friends, thank you for watching Digging for Truth. We hope you enjoyed this episode and consider the evidence that Dr. Johnston presented today.